And what he said was, in order to produce depth in a painting, you need 3 brightness levels. Okay? You need the true brightness of your subject, and then you need 2 brightnesses that are not true. One that's brighter than the true brightness, and one that's darker than the true brightness. What he told us in that statement is that we've got to have true brightness, which is right there. We've got to have a brightness that's not true, which is right there. And we've got to have a brightness that's not true, which is right there, in order to produce depth, shape, form, texture, dimension. Okay? So what he's saying is you've got to have all 3 of these things, and then you have depth. Great. How many of those are you in charge of? You're in charge of 2 of them. I'm not in charge of what you look like, Britt. You are. I'm not in charge of your skin tone. You are. I am in charge of what I do with this and that. That and that. I can do anything I want with those highlights and shadows. I can make the shadow as sharp as I want. I can make it as soft. I can bring in a reflector and make it almost non-existent. I can make that highlight enormous, or I can make that highlight small and sharp and cutting. I can do anything I want with the shadow and the highlight, but one thing I cannot muck around with is that. You better look like you look, or I fail. You're in charge of that part. I have to properly expose that. But in the world of light quality, that's up to you. You get to look how you look, you know. It's funny how, to me, and I want to roll this right into the meter here in just a sec, but it's funny to me how many people second guess their exposures with meters. My brother-in-law was my best friend and gave me my first job in photography. And I went to Lagos, Nigeria in 1980. I was brand new. I was a young photographer, and I went to photograph 65 heads of state. Now, it's a long story that you don't want to hear how I got this job. But one of the things that happened was the last thing my brother-in-law told me as I got on the plane is, now remember, their skin's really dark. Open up a little extra on your exposure. And I'm like, okay, and off I went. And what I was doing was I was exposing for their tonality as opposed to exposing for the amount of light I had. The problem was, on the opening night of this exhibit that I was at the Federal Palace, I've got all these really dark faces and one person dressed in white who was from the UK and had really lily white skin. And I opened up because everybody's skin is so dark, and I nuked this poor girl. Right? So what I learned quickly was, okay, note to self. You don't expose based on someone's tonality. You expose based on the quantity of light that is present. And if you do that, you can't get fooled. Right? So it's like when you do a group shot. Well, some people are wearing a black suit and some people are wearing a white shirt. You can't change your exposure based on what they are wearing. You have to change your exposure based on how much light you have. That's all that matters with the exposure. How much light is there? And that was the biggest lesson for me. So as long as I can properly place that exposure on that file, right there, at that place of true tonality, that true brightness of your skin tone, or the car, or the widget, whatever I'm photographing, as long as I can place that there, then those 2 I can do anything I want with. Those are subjective. The highlights and shadows, totally subjective. That is my one piece of objectivity in the photograph.